What's up, YouTube? Welcome to my second video. This is Luke Rasante here to bring you information on gaming engines and specifically Unity. So, gaming engines are something really cool. You hadn't heard about them much because many of the game studios, publishers, and the bigger AAA type companies build them in-house. So they're proprietary, used internally, and then generally for a franchise, it makes them possibly easier to just kind of reuse the same components and just adapting. Take, for instance, Grand Theft Auto. Many of the same gameplay and mechanics exist across each one of them, and that's likely from a proprietary in-house built engine. So why am I so excited about a company called Unity? One, because of the software, of course. Gaming engines are incredibly complex because they try to simulate not necessarily real-world situations, but generally real-world properties that can be controlled to the specific nature of the environment you're trying to create. For instance, you can apply mechanics that where two objects will collide and a random sort of occurrence will happen on one of the colliding items, going into following some sort of like physical property and characteristics that you applied, like a force setting or perhaps speed. So while all these crazy interactions are happening, you can imagine that there's a massive amount of computation that goes into each one of them, which means creating these things are a quite monumental task, especially for smaller developers like indie studios, but even for the large studios. And increasingly, when you're focused on a storyline and then you're focused on developing and building characters and maybe via art, it's difficult to then think about how you're going to program some of this in terms of actually executing how pixels interact on the screen. And this is exactly why I think there's going to be this huge divergence of specialists via gaming engine creators like Unity, which I'm really here to talk about, and Unreal Engine, and then from the studios like Activision Blizzard, like Rockstar Games, Take-Two Interactive. There's going to be, I believe, a divergence, and then you'll find more of those AAA studios and larger studios that are going to use the gaming engine services that are made available to them. So, what is Unity? Well, Unity was founded in 2004 as initially a gaming engine. This meant a tool for creators and game builders to go create games. They could build and import different pieces of art, different files, they could animate, and then they could create and really build an interactive environment. Again, back to that physics comments, where things could collide, where things could move, where a user could put and control inputs to be able to, interact with the object on display. And so if you're looking at the background, this isn't what Unity is, but this is made by Unity. And this is exactly why the company is so interesting to me. So what was completely built for games has now been realized into so much more because of the complexity behind the engine, behind the processing and algorithms they've figured out to make creating high-def digital renderings, to make that efficient. But they've realized that these tools can now provide other industries like automotive, like manufacturing, general film, like visual effects, and quite a few more. And so what I'm showing you now is just an example so you guys can get a taste of the capabilities. And this is Atom, built by a studio called Oats. So after reading through the S1 documentation, I captured what I thought were the biggest takeaways and put them up here in a public Notion space. And so, to talk about first, if you haven't heard about Unity, there's a chance you've heard about some of the projects they've worked on. The biggest one that comes to mind is the Niantic Pokemon Go partnership. Of course, Pokemon Go is really the first just insanely widely adapted AR app that lets you roam around real life, experiencing sort of a map-based guidance system where you can interact and be in certain settings and catch Pokemon, and of course whatever else entails being a Pokemon trainer. And so some of the other projects they've worked with, or just companies in general that you'd be familiar with or should be, would be BMW, Volvo, again, talking about that automotive space where they can create simulations, where they can create actual digital renderings that could be used for marketing material. How else can you exaggerate an epic car scene? Well, you can't risk that necessarily in real life, so you can bring it into an amazingly close high definition rendering system like Unity and create that visual effect, or not visual effect, but video content. Samsung's another notable partner. And there's many more. You'll see momentarily how expansive Unity really is. So as I mentioned, founded in 2004, they currently have a set of software solutions to create, run, and monetize interactive, real-time 2D and 3D content for mobile phones, tablets, PCs, consoles, and AR/VR devices. So the other thing they do, they'll provide tools to build these and to make your development experience, say if you're an indie developer or any developer, easier to work with your colleagues by collaborative tools within things such as like simultaneous edits. Think of it as kind of like a Google Sheet type thing, but in your actual Unity console or your engine or your Unity art tool. And so one of the biggest takeaways that they wanted to highlight is that you can build once and deploy across 20 platforms. And so you're not writing platform-specific code. This is incredibly important because previously without this, and really in any facets, developers would have to write code for an individual console, and they might have to quote-unquote port it over to another console, which meant sometimes writing another code base, or it meant adapting a code base. So back in the day, before there were tools like maybe React Native, if you wanted to develop an Android app, you would develop using the Kotlin or general Android specific languages and tools. And if you want to develop an iOS app for your Apple iPhone or any Apple tool, you'd be using Swift UI or something along those lines. You can see the divergence, but then a tool like React Native can come along that can use and access the native features of both of Google or Android and of Apple. And so in some sort of parallel, but for gaming, this is exactly what Unity enables. If you want to deploy on Xbox, on Windows, PlayStation, you have that ability, and Unity makes it incredibly simple. When you build your app, you can specify and you find this out. Or you can specify and, well, execute, so you can end up having that as a live and functioning item. So the key takeaways: they're the leading platform for creating and operating interactive real-time 3D content. Well, how do you quantify that? They've done it for us. 1.5 million monthly active creators. This means people who are engaging with the tools as, say, an employee of a company and building the experiences for a consumer at the end of it. It says over 50% of mobile, PC games, and console games combined are made with Unity. There's also 3 billion app downloads per month related to apps that were built on Unity. They experience, again, and this is more in the console for employees, for creators, over 15K new projects a day. There's over 50 billion in-app events per day across 20 platforms. Why is that important? Well, back to what I was mentioning a moment ago about how they have these create and operate solutions. That is part of the operate solutions, and we'll get into those. 53% of the top 1,000 mobile games in the App Store and Google Play are made with Unity. Over 50% of mobile games, PC games, and console games are made with Unity. 93 of the top 100 game development studios by revenue were Unity customers. And Unity Pro average users, so Unity Pro would be the console for creating, again, users spend an average of 4.9 hours per day using the platform. So all incredibly impressive, big numbers, and it's not advertised out there because these are created by creators and it's meant for end users. It's not necessarily going to be an advertisement of Unity. So say you're playing a mobile game, there is a good chance, according to this percentage, that you're playing something that was built with the Unity engine or the Unity tools in general. So industries. Gaming industry is the fastest growing sector in media with over 2.5 billion gamers. This completely makes sense, specifically when you look at geographies like China and India, who's now bringing hundreds of millions of people online with smartphones. And the smartphones, even on the cheaper end, are becoming better and better with processing and more efficient so that they can actually play these mobile games. Gaming went from 15 billion 20 years ago to over 140 billion in annual revenue today. Well, again, that's an extension of just so many things and improvements. Not going to go into that. I don't have enough gaming expertise for that. Things evolved beyond one-time purchases. So when you think about a game back in the day, you would spend $60 for that disc that you could play in, say, your Xbox, on your PC, or your PlayStation. Now we're moving into something like more of a Fortnite type experience where you can consistently purchase. You can buy new development kits, new maps, new content. You do those. Those are generally in-app purchases. And then, yeah, so as the crazy thing is, as Unity as a company was growing and seeing the capabilities of the gaming engine and of the items being created, they were starting to co-create with new partners. And when I say co-create, I mean new partners saw this tool as a potential possibility for their operations and their business. So that's what I mean by co-developed and co-created. And they started to go into automobile and building design, online augmented reality products, autonomous driving simulation. So thinking about what was 2D, 3D games, now you have Pokemon Go. Now you have BMW and automobile manufacturers using Unity to either simulate autonomous vehicles, meaning you can give this object mobility capabilities. You can simulate things around it, such as traffic, people crossing the roads, different scenarios, and more you can tweak to make them real-life parameters because it can be built off of physics. And now quickly I'll try and get here into their general business. So they have two complementary solutions but totally distinct. They have create solutions. These are the tools where you're actually doing developing. It might be an artist creating artwork. It might be a game developer using that artwork and providing it with custom tooling for interactivity amongst objects within the game, creating levels. And it might be, really anything. It could be an AR experience for someone who's captured, say, a real estate room or is looking to do 3D rendering of a architectural concept. And that's generally create solutions. It's used by content creators. They're building tools to make your job easier, especially when it comes to bringing it to a wider audience. And so the other piece is operate solutions, and this is an increasingly hot spot for Unity, but this is essentially what they offer to developers to collect metrics, to understand user behavior, and ultimately gain more value out of what they've created. So long-term value, LTV. You're able to optimize and use like marketing analytics to target new people. You're able to target existing people, try and sort of understand behavior. They're increasingly making it easier to just use Unity as a one-tool solution to create your content and then publish it out for people to consume, but also make that a profitable business venture for you. And so an important metric here is 63% of Operate Solutions revenue came from customers with over 100,000 in annual revenue that also use Create Solutions. So they're generating over 100K per year, and they're using Unity's general creator tools to fuel whatever they're selling. And so you can have things, again, Unity ads, Unity in-app purchases, Delta DNA. This is for user engagement and behavior. And then there's other things like multiplayer, like in-game communications. Think about your matchmaking engine if you've ever played like Call of Duty. When you're finding a match, think about with communications, the just general chat where you had a lobby of people. Increasingly, Unity is making that happen because one, it's complex back-end work, and two, it makes it easier for the developer, the creator, to go push their content out there. And yeah, of the business, the last thing to highlight is I don't have the exact measure, but Unity invests extensively in research and development. I believe it's somewhere over 50% of their employees are R&D focused, meaning engineering, research scientist type people who are very focused on the technical problems and solving those. And in this space where you're simulating, where you're trying to predict multiple steps of how, or you're rendering on, say, a continuous line where as a user moves through, you need to be rapidly generating their visual experience, what the character would see. All of these are incredibly computationally intense. There's networking involved. I'm not enough of an expert to talk more on it, but you can imagine the importance. And so I just highlighted that over the past 2 years, they've invested over $450 million in their R&D, and I imagine that number will continue to scale up as their business really quickly increases. And so now just down to some numbers. From 2018 to 2019, they grew from 380 to 541 million revenue, 42% year-over-year growth there. Their dollar-based net expansion rate, which measures expansion of the existing customers' revenue, that grew from 124% in 2018 to 133%. So this means the existing revenue they're generating from one customer, it meant that existing customer a year later has now spent significantly more. So let's see here. Their free cash flow is moved in a positive direction from 119 million to 94 million. I'm not super experienced in free cash flow, so I don't want to give you a definition or anything, but that's kind of general consensus, one of the more important measures for kind of building cash on hand, what you can use for reinvestment, buying down debt, other items. 54% of their revenue came from operate solutions, so those were the Unity ads, the in-app purchases, hosting, those multiplayer, the communications, dealing with all the complex work to get your game live. That really is where operate revenue or operate solutions comes in. 72% of their revenue was generated outside of the US. That's a huge metric. Just naturally thinking about a US company, even though this company originally was founded in Denmark, I believe, 72% outside of the US, that's a really big number. That means they're likely very geographical, and it means there's an opportunity to capture more that's happening in the US. Maybe getting increased business from Activision Blizzard, increased business from EA Games. And that also might mean there's other opportunities elsewhere. Perhaps most of their business is gathered in Europe as of today, or Southeast Asia. Maybe there's more opportunity in China. 74% of the revenue were generated by customers with over 100K of revenue. So this is kind of just an indication of more of a concentration. And I believe that revenue number is also important because when you hit that mark, that's when some of Unity's solutions and, say, either royalties, revenue splits, or percent share agreements do come into place. And then something other important financial news was they are in a $189 million cloud service agreement with Google Cloud. And this runs out in 2024. And that's a really big point to mention just because that also can be a really big benefit. So if you're developing on the cloud, this means you have more flexibility to turn on and off solutions. Being that they're in an agreement, they probably have a defined number of users, or not users, but services within the scope of the agreement. But that still is a good thing for one, having more ability to move up and down. One, to allow more flexibility to the actual developers to be able to have the latest technology, to not need necessarily ordering new servers for extra compute if they were running, say, a simulation or working on an AI model. It's generally beneficial to be on the cloud, especially for the cutting edge. And so just some quick notes on the opportunity they're seeing. They believe it's a $29 billion total addressable market. That's that TAM. They believe $12 billion from gaming, and they're estimating that to be $16 billion in 2025, and then $17 billion from other industries. This is the automotive, this is the architecture, the construction, all sorts of things. Future opportunities could present much larger than what they're predicting. So one thing that I'm noting here is right now there's an increasing move to this idea of no code, which means someone without coding experience can still use a builder tool software to make their project. Working in things like this may make the overall pool of content creators significantly higher, growing the overall audience of consumers and the pay towards that. And there's other ideas like perhaps high performance rendering, something that's super computationally intensive. Maybe they figure out a new pricing model for things like this. Maybe it starts outsourcing other types of photo, like actual photo capture, video capture items. AR, VR, if this experiences an explosion as many are predicting, right now Unity seems to be the leader in both of those categories. Oculus Quest 2 was just recently released and is, I believe, around $300 or $400 for the additional storage one. But this is like represents an insane decrease in hardware price sort of year over year or year over past 2 years. And you can see that VR as a whole is becoming much more consumer friendly, which will probably slowly start attracting these large studios and just general game developers to start building better content, because right now that is still a limitation. There's also iPhone 12 Pro, which has LiDAR. With LiDAR, you can capture and map 3D sort of environments, so you can gain depth and the ability to scan assets and upload them into these 3D worlds. There's also Snapchat Spectacles, so the pretty neat Snapchat glasses that you can wear around and capture video recordings on. And then Facebook has Project Aria, which is the AR glasses that they'll be introducing at some time. Not to mention Apple is interested in the AR glasses as well, and that's sort of predicted as imminent within the next 2 to 3 years, I believe. And there's tons of other projects, like engineers who build engines could see how their products could be prototyped in this environment. And Unity is increasingly partnering with these engineering type tools like CAD to be able to import that project and then give it maybe perhaps Unity animation and interactivity. Threats and red flags. So Apple has released with sort of Big Sur this new thing where they make it very noticeable when you're sharing your data with advertisers, and it's very much this opt-in system. So this is something Facebook is obviously very fearful of, but most importantly, it's just an idea of the data that an advertiser can collect for hyper-targeted ads, which are notoriously more expensive ads because you understand your audience more, but you're also more confident that that person will be a good use of marketing spend, someone that would convert on it. You're less able to maximize on that. There's also some limitations with iOS and Google Play. So if you're following any of the drama with Epic Games, there are some discrepancies amongst the percent share that an app is required to pay in the Apple Store, which right now is around 30%. I do believe that this number has or will be reduced depending on the size of the game. And there's some other competitive threats. Epic Games, the makers of Fortnite and Gears of War, and just an incredible studio. They have what's called the Unreal Engine, which was a proprietary engine that they use in-house, but now is following the same sort of style as Unity, being a tool that any creator can go in and build games with, but that's now extending into film. So if you're familiar with the Disney original Mandalorian, the Star Wars original, The Mandalorian, that relies heavily on the Unreal Engine for many of its scenes, which is crazy to think about. That's how realistic these engines are becoming, and it's kind of mind-opening where you think that might be able to head. Epic Games does have a competitive suite in their publishing and just general services systems where they take a very small percentage of revenue if you've met a certain revenue threshold, and they're making it really enticing to want to use their product to develop games and work with as a whole. There could be threats from other major gaming companies, Ubisoft, EA, Take-Two Interactive, Blizzard, Activision Blizzard. These companies may have certain interests. They might make agreements either with Epic Games or work on releasing their own version of it, pending on the lucrative. There's also some open source tools like Blender 3D that's really enticing. And then always going to mention Amazon, Google, Facebook, Apple. They're increasingly after this media space. Maybe they're interested in getting some of this power so you can develop games on their system, because if you look at Apple, they increasingly want to own each piece of the stack and the user experience. You've seen this with the Apple M1 chips, Apple Silicon, and just Big Sur as a whole, where you can kind of develop and deploy these Apple apps across your Apple devices. So you could, if you want, run an iOS app on your Mac. It's moving towards this, and each of these companies is also very much interested in augmented reality. So that might be another threat. So quickly, I just want to sort of finalize this video, give quick commentary on a project I made following a just general YouTube tutorial. But I'm just going to quickly shoot around in the space shooter. This is something that pretty much a very novice user could end up creating. And this is just really the peak of the iceberg, as I was showing earlier with the Atom video that was essentially just a completely CGI VFX built short film. And so just quickly opening up to see what a script might look like, the real coding you have to do, and that's if you don't want to choose to use a visual scripting tool like Bolt, which is a subsidiary, it was acquired by Unity, you would make just a general few things in C#, such as, let's see here, we're saying based on like send an object down, factor in its speed, and convert this to real time so that it would be in seconds. Okay, another thing, this is on trigger, what would happen? So if another player's hit on trigger, we're gonna get this, and then we're gonna do a damage. If it was a laser that was hit, we're gonna remove that game object because the laser contacted. And yeah, that's sort of it. So I'm pumped about Unity. Unity IPO'd, I believe, in September, if I'm not correct. It IPO'd and began trading where the public could actually access it around $75-ish. It dipped a little bit below to the mid-60s perhaps, but it's skyrocketed since. Right now, I believe it's over $155, and that's been no more than roughly 3 months, maybe a little over. I'm, again, not providing investment advice, but I'm really bullish, I'm really excited about these gaming engines because of the complexity that's gone into all the R&D and the opportunities to start picking apart traditional businesses like film that's relied heavily on the green screen, or like automotive where you don't necessarily have digital creation experts that are building these marketing materials or that are running these simulations, but you could do this and all within Unity. And so those are those components, and I really do think of this idea, it's an economic term, comparative advantage. It sort of gives permission or encourages those who can produce something and do something more efficiently or effectively to specialize. And that's really what I believe here these gaming engines stand for. Their specialization. Unity does not have to write and build out storylines. They don't have to worry about character design and development. They need to only worry about animations, physics, and collisions, and then giving you the tools to be able to do high quality renders, to be able to import your models, import your visuals into it. And yeah, that's it. So thank you for tuning in for number 2. I am totally pumped for whatever comes next. If you like this, please like it. Otherwise, generally subscribe. If you have any feedbacks or interests of where to head to next, I'm happy to listen. One thing that is very interesting to me is Epic Games. It would be right in the same genre, but something a bit different because Epic Games is a private company. So please, leave any feedback in. Thank you so much for tuning in.